WFM can help law enforcement agencies manage scheduling, staffing, and compliance. Stick around as we explore its evolution, as well as how it addresses union rules and workforce challenges. Welcome back to RPI Tech Connect. I'm your host, Chris Arey, and we've got a very exciting topic ahead of us this afternoon. We're going to be talking about Infor Workforce Management and how it supports law enforcement agencies by addressing their unique workforce challenges. To help us unpack this topic, I am thrilled to be joined by Brett Taylor, a senior WFM consultant here at RPI. He's got over 20 years experience working with WFM applications within a law enforcement ecosystem. So Brett, thank you for joining me today, sir.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Great to have you on the show, man. I think a great way to kick off our discussion today is to kind of hear more about your background. You know, you spent the last two decades working with a federal law enforcement agency using WorkBrain, which I believe has now been acquired by Infor. So what can you share about your journey there and how has the product evolved?
Well, I'll start a little bit before. So I started my working life in the trades as a cabinet maker and a carpenter, and I'll kind of circle back around to why that's relevant. But so I was brought in to implement what then was WorkBrain for a federal law enforcement agency, and I was brought in just as a technical consultant. We needed to build an interface into NFC, the National Finance Center. If you're in the federal government, there's one of four payroll providers that have these old, bulky mainframe systems, and that is the only way that you can pay people in the federal government. So I was brought in to customize a good chunk of Java code that would be able to take what was then WorkBrain information and get people paid properly. At the same time, there were a lot of reports that needed to be done, and this is going back over 20 years. And so we were still using the internal tools that came with the product, and it was an onerous process at best. But what happened is we got it implemented, and then that agency, the people in human resources, said, you know what, we think we need continued support on this. They offered me a job, and I had absolutely no idea that that's where I was going to land, but I continued to support the product for the last 20 years. So, one of the things that I have seen is just a tremendous amount of change in what the product was versus what the product has become now. When we first started, all of the officers, if they needed to look at their timesheet, they had to go to shared computers that were throughout the complex, right?
Yeah.
And physical time clocks. And some of those physical time clocks are still in existence, but there was no such thing as any kind of a mobile application or anything like that. Well, now the product, WorkBrain was purchased by Infor, and Infor has put a tremendous amount of R&D and improvements into the product. And now they have a module called Employee Self-Service, and you're on your phone, and you can look at your leave balances, you can do your leave request, you can bid on a schedule if that's allowed within your organization. And to settle the concerns of management, if you will, you can swipe on that phone, but you can also do what's called geofencing. So you can control where an employee can use that from, right?
Yeah.
So it's that's a substantial change from that internal only reporting tool. They partnered with Cognos, and now Cognos comes embedded with the product, and that was a huge change. So, kind of a common theme that I've seen is there would be a need, and it would be recognized, and then that need would get addressed, and how that has changed has been substantial. When we first started, this was, again, 20 years ago, but there wasn't any means for archiving the data. So your database could just grow huge. And then customers said, hey, look, we've got these huge data sets of old data. And the folks back then, it was still WorkBrain, but they said, all right, well, we're going to implement a whole module for managing archiving of your data, because they listened to what people said, and they implemented these changes. They had a whole enhancement request system where you would say, hey, I'd like to see this, and you could collaborate with other customers, and they would say, hey, we'd like to see it too, and it would get
Nice.
upvoted and things like that. Well, a lot of those changes, say 10 years ago, would kind of languish. And it would be really hard to get that moving. What I've witnessed as a customer of Inforce is they've put a lot of effort into making it much more easy for people to put those requests in, for those changes to happen, for that cycle of when somebody
Mm.
wants a change to when it actually becomes operational has shortened greatly. So that's one of the other really important big change is when we first implemented it, it was all on-prem, right? So
Mm.
you would have your own servers, and you would put your software on your servers, and when after you bought the software, that's how you rolled. And there was at the time doing custom coding wasn't I wouldn't say that it was encouraged, but it wasn't necessarily discouraged. So, and because of what we had available to us, we we saw the Swiss Army knife of tools available, and really highly customized it, and kind of used the product probably beyond what it should have been used for, but we didn't have an HR system to work with. Right. So one of the changes that has come about is they've said, for the core logic, for the core business application to stay as modern as possible, to implement these changes, to ensure that security is up to snuff, we're going to go to a multi-tenant cloud-based system. And so if that has been, and from what I've seen as a customer, I mean, that's been a huge move forward.
Yeah.
And somebody say, well, wait a minute, I have these things that happen within my organization that don't happen anywhere else for how we pay people, right? For if I have somebody who comes in at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm an officer and I'm a canine handler, and my dog didn't come to work with me because the dog's at the vet, and this, and then some other condition, and there's where am I going to be able to do that? Well, that's a very easily manageable thing now with the extent. It's called Groovy, which is just scripts that you can kind of hang off of the application and be able to manage your custom conditions and your custom rules. That said, so if we're talking where it was to where it is now, the amount of custom conditions and custom rules has gone away because customers have said, hey, we continuously have these kinds of problems. And another customer would
Mm.
say, I continuously have this kind of same kind of condition, same kind of rule, right?
So they
And
make them like
now
standard like functionality within the
just standard
application.
functionality, right?
Nice.
I mean, labor organizations have standard things that happen. People get paid extra money to work on the weekends. People get paid extra money to work night shifts.
Yeah.
Those are just very common things that happen. And so the product has just kind of kept pace with that. So now we have this really complex example, and all you do is you go in and you pick the different rules, and then you configure them. And there's several things. Some of the code that I wrote to be able to manage that agency's special conditions, that stuff's now available. It's
Y-
'cause somebody else had the exact same kind of problem,
Yeah.
right?
You have to love how like in tune Infor has been with like being community driven here. They're seeing that these requests are coming in to add this feature functionality or this kind of custom coding. Like they're seeing that happen so often. It's like, well, why don't we just make this a part of the software standard, like as it out of
Yes,
the box?
yes,
So to
yes.
hear about those types of changes is awesome. And from your perspective, especially being on the customer, being a customer of the application, and then now 20 years later, you're helping other customers make
Well,
better use of it, right?
and that's one of the reasons that I've made a transition to RPI, is because that's RPI is now cutting edge, right? And they're saying, hey, what's the newest things that come out? And I see some of my fellow team members who are assisting their customers and saying, hey, we have a special enhancement. How do we put this in? So I am now in seeing these things on a continuous basis, and it's exciting. And I'm have already heard of use cases and of someone thinks they have something that's so complex it can't be handled, and it can be a double-sided coin with this application, but it's a Swiss Army knife, and it's like, not only can that be handled, but these days it can be handled without customization. It can be handled with configuration, right? So
Yeah.
speaking of configuration, right? I mean,
I'm glad you're making that distinction clear. Actually, I think Randy had
it's critical.
mentioned that on a different episode. Yeah,
It's
so go ahead.
critical. It's critical to understand, right? And so, but and now that I'm on the other side, I'm not just a customer, but I can see underneath the hood a little bit. And there's tools available that say, hey, you make a configuration change and you test it, and there's a way to just migrate it. You don't have to go back through and re-click your configurations, right? You don't have to, and just that's all a product of someone saying, here's a need, and then Infor going, you know what, we're gonna listen to what you're saying. We're gonna respond
Yeah.
to that need,
Yeah.
so that it's what does it do? It brings value to the customer. It just does, right? And I got to tell you, Chris, that's an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yes, sir.
It just is. It just is. Yeah.
I love your enthusiasm for it. WFM has been a hot topic lately, and actually, Keith Whalen, the managing partner here at RPI, just had him on the program, and we were talking about WFM. We have high expectations for 2025, so it seems like the product is headed in the right direction, and it just continues to improve. So I appreciate you, telling me your journey with the program,
Sure.
and how it's evolved from your perspective, as well as how your relationship with it has changed as well. So I want to take a minute here. You mentioned some really good technical things about how WFM has evolved, but I'm curious, what makes it such a great tool for managing, police and other types of first responders, like in law enforcement?
Oh, sure. And I think I kind of went down the road of, say, the canine officer coming on the
Yeah.
other side,
Yep.
right? But those kinds of use cases are very common in law enforcement, right? So you're going to have patrol officers who have a job. You're going to have, say, your investigative division who has another job. You might have a protective unit who goes about, their job is to provide protection for very important people, right? And how you schedule those people, who the people are that need to be scheduled, even some of the pay rules. You could be that if you're in one of these units, you are not a member of the same bargaining unit as one of these other units, and those different bargaining units could have different rules about how people need to get paid, about
Oh,
how people need to be scheduled, and things like that. And that's just bread and butter. It's a thing called a calculation group. You change your calculation groups, and when you move from one part of the organization to the other, your calculation group changes, and
it does it automatically.
you're good. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
You got to think too, like if you remove the number of manual like changes you're doing, it's going to reduce errors. It's going to be faster. It's going to make people happier with their jobs. It's just good all around.
Absolutely. And that's what do you want an officer to be focused on the job that officer needs to do. You don't
And
want that officer to wonder whether or not they're being paid correctly. You don't want that officer to wonder whether or not their request for leave was approved. You don't want them to have to stand in line to be able to get onto a terminal to be able to look at that information. You put it in their hands and their phone, and they can look at their phone and they can see what's going on, and you can
yeah,
do
meeting
it
them
so
where
that
they
it's
are.
correct,
You
right?
love
Meet them where
that.
they are, right?
Yeah.
And that's another thing. The this generation of people who are now coming into law enforcement, you tell them to stand in line to go to a terminal to enter information in. You
Forget
may as
it.
well have told them, hey, here's a chisel and a hammer. Go carve it out of a piece of rock, man. Right? I mean, it's just that's how we communicate now. And
Yeah.
Infor has seen that, and they've put just their the employee self-service, what it's called, and they have a mobile application where if you're in the rest of the Infor universe, you can do your business on your phone, and that's just how the world works
It
these
is.
days.
It
Yeah,
is. It's great to hear that
it's a
they've made
reality.
those changes too. So, for those who might be listening to our discussion right now who are considering WFM, what makes it such a strong choice, especially if they're already in a multi-tenant ecosystem? What can you share
I
there?
don't think you could have given me an easier question to answer, right? No, seriously, because so we weren't. First of all, we weren't multi-tenant. Second of all, we did not any of the other modules that someone would typically already have in multi-tenant were in completely isolated systems that frequently were mainframe based. That if there was a change that needed to be made to that mainframe application, it's extremely difficult. I think I heard on one of the earlier podcasts, and I would just repeat the joke. You're going to have to go to the retirement home to go find somebody to come and make that change for you, right? And, and that's not just in the federal government. That's there's still a lot of payroll systems that are mainframe based, and so if someone's already in the Infor ecosystem and they're already on multi-tenant and their HR is already a multi-tenant, it's just you're almost just flipping the switch. The ease of that interoperability and some of the things that we had to do with the agency that I was with to make some of that stuff happen was just, or there were things that we couldn't do that it was not a limitation of WFM. It was a limitation of the system that we were feeding information into. Just couldn't respond. Whereas now you can, it's not as easy as just flipping a switch, but it's not much more difficult than that. I'll be honest with you. It's really,
It sounds like it's a no-brainer then if you're already on the cloud. Like
if you're already multi-tenant in the Infor universe and you're looking for time and attendance or you're looking for scheduling, that is as easy of a decision as you would have to make. Because let's just take the business case that you don't. You go with another system, and then you have to build all those integrations in.
Yeah.
Right. You have to wire all that stuff together. And if you're not built in a way that you can respond to change, you're just stuck in the past. And Infor has demonstrated they're particularly with what I know of WFM, right? They're actively putting effort into research and development. They're actively moving the product forward, and they're competing and they're winning.
That's something that we've talked about on this program before too. Is that like, previously dominant players like UKG and Kronos for workforce management, like Infor is definitely carving out a huge part of that market. We're continuing to see it increase as time goes on. So it's always good to see.
I can't say bad things about some of these other products, but I will say that. So now we'll go all the way back 20 years. So prior to the agency that I came on with, I had been with a company that supported the Kronos was used as a time and attendance application, and that's the product that I supported at the time. And the change in how you could kind of lift up the hood and do what you needed to do, and what at that time was WorkBrain and Kronos, even going back 20 years, was still, I was like, wow, this is really a different model, and an appealing model, particularly to a much more technically minded person. Of kind of, I'm not looking at the top layer, I'm looking at what's under the hood. And I want to see a 407 that's turbocharged, and instead of lifting up the hood and you got a little four banger and you can't even get over top of the mountain, right? So it's cool. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So I want to pivot a little bit here. The software is obviously impressive. It's continuing to evolve, but buying that software isn't the end all be all. There's a lot that goes into implementing and adopting that. So like, what kind of strategies or recommendations would you have for agencies to go about securing, buy-in from both leadership, from the top to the bottom?
Absolutely. So, and I to your very point, from the top to the bottom, it's top to the bottom, and from the left to the right. And by what I mean by that is, so particularly for law enforcement, you there can frequently be maybe somewhat of a divide between, say, your business and administrative side of house and your operational side of house in law
Sure.
enforcement, right? And having both sides of the house agree this is what we're doing, this is what we want to do, and this is why we want to do it, as well as having not just from the, just like you said, from the top to the bottom, but having someone, say, at the officer level, having someone at the sergeant level, the lieutenant level, your different levels of your ranks within the organizational structure, and finding out who are the people that see the value in this, that can, there is no word travels faster than the words that are going on inside the locker room, right? And so if you have strong voices in the locker room, if you have strong voices at roll call who can see the value, that is something that can really be a key to implementation. I think a big mistake is to say this is just going to be a top-down decision that's driven by the administrative side of the house, and just take it and we're just going to tell you how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Well, people naturally resist that, right? Human beings in general, it's not just law enforcement, but human beings just in general, people are going to resist that kind of, that lack of change management.
Got it. No, that makes total sense.
I actually have a story on that. And this was before I was even an employee, when we were still doing the original implementation. And I remember we were testing the time clocks, and I was standing behind the chief of police in the very beginning of the morning as he was getting ready to start his day. And he was standing behind an officer, and I was standing behind him, and I was testing the time clock. It's like, wow, the chief's hit the time clock. And so, right? I'm like, what? And I was like, sir, you don't have to hit the time clock. This isn't, you're in a special group that it just happens. You don't need to do this. And I remember he said, if it's good enough for the troops, it's good enough for me. And he wanted to set the example, and he did, right? And so I'll never forget that. He always, was very focused on, if I'm asking my officers to do something, I should be willing to do the same job myself.
Leading
right?
by example. You got to
Leading
love
by
that.
example.
That's
Leading by example.
fantastic.
Yep.
And when you have that kind of alignment too, that people are going to come together and be collaborative and implementing, whatever kind of changes might be coming.
Well, and people in the field, it's just remarkable how, if you can get someone talking and they can say, hey, what about, and frequently that, hey, what about, makes all the sense in the world.
It's the seed that gets planted.
Yes. And nobody has, it hasn't been a top-down thing. It's just somebody's like, hey, I every single day I do the same thing, and it doesn't make sense to me why I'm doing the same thing every day. And whether it's I'm having to hand fill out a form, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, is there any way we can get that form so that it's electronic? Or what's being done with this information? Is it really relevant? Is it important? And I think that's also, particularly if someone's moving to adoption, there could very well be stuck in some old business practices, and it's worth saying, do we need to keep doing that? I mean, we've always done it, but what are we doing with that piece of information? Right?
That line right there is such a dangerous one. We've always done it this way, so it can't be wrong. It's like, no, there's a better way. Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Brett. Well,
absolutely.
I got to say, we're getting close to time. Before we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests if they could offer our audience and today's listeners one actionable takeaway from our topic today. What would it be? So I would love to hear what kind of wisdom you can share with us for those maybe thinking about adopting WFM.
You can tell my how much I like to talk. I'm not going to give you just one. I'm going to give you two. Okay. So, But really, the two things I would say from a super high level, and then I'll maybe talk a little bit more about them, but is to plan for change, right? And then to plan for continuous adoption. And what does that mean? That means change management is a very, very large deal. You're affecting employees at all levels of the organization, and to have them understand why and how and buy into it and realize human beings changing. You're dealing with changes that are very fundamental to how they conduct their day in, day out life at work, and to be fair in that process, and then at the same time to say, we're not, just because you don't want to doesn't mean we're not going to do it, but we're gonna listen to your feedback, and we're gonna make allowances. So I think that's really critically important, because change management is just it's we're human beings, right? And just respect the fact that you're dealing with human beings. And the other one, continuous adoption. Don't boil the my current boss, he's talking about, he said,
Don't boil the ocean.
don't boil the ocean, Brent, right? And because I'm a technologist, I'm like, oh, we can do this, we can do that, we can, right? And he's like, no, let's just settle down, and let's get but seriously, let's get everybody paid correctly, and then let's figure out what are some of these edge circumstances and let it grow. And if we go back to that adoption that we were talking about, from top to bottom and left to right throughout your organization, you'll get people who'll start coming forth with, hey, can't we, wouldn't it be a good idea if we, right? And then just realize that if you're already going to be leveraging something that's capable of change, embrace that, and plan on, what, we can't do all of it right now, but we're going to be live, and then we're going to continue to move forward. And whether that is through staff augmentation, or continuing to pay a consulting firm, or whoever, or whether you have your own internal staff. The problem is, your own internal staff, if they're not supporting it right now, how are they, where are they going to find time in their day to continue to support it? But just as a leader, if you're the person making that decision, think that through. Of, this is just going to keep going. This is we're not just going to buy this car and just keep driving it. You're going to have to continue to put gas in it. You're going to have to change your brakes. That's just part of what it is, and allow for that, and it'll perform for you.
I really love that advice there about the continuous improvement. That's something we always talk about here at RPI. Once you go live, it's not the end, and really kind of creating that culture where, end users and such can come forth and say, what if we did this change, or what about this? Like, just getting in that mindset of how you can continuously improve and enhance the application is really gonna, overall, like, increase your return on investment there. So
yeah. Absolutely, and you're working within an entire universe now of software with an organization that's encouraging that. I mean, I can see in reading release notes how long all of the release notes are of what's coming out. You're like, whoa, I didn't see this, I didn't see that. Yeah, it's impressive.
A lot of good changes on the horizon and already in production. So love to see that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Brett. This has been an absolute joy chatting with you this afternoon. For those of you listening in, if you have any questions about today, our discussion today, or about WFM or anything else at all, we encourage you to contact us at podcast@rpic.com. Again, that's podcast@rpic.com. This has been RPI Tech Connect, and we'll see you next time. See you, Brett.
Fabulous. Thank you, Chris.